Fly fishing with some kind of indicator is just slightly more sophisticated than bobber fishing. But your indicator, much more than being just a signal of a strike, is a drift indicator. It tells you in what current lane your fly is drifting, and by carefully observing your indicator, it gives you a hint on whether your fly is drifting naturally with the current. When I first learned to fish nymphs, we didn't have sophisticated indicators, and we used a direct upstream or almost direct upstream approach and watched our floating line. This is a nice, clean way of fishing, and I still use it at times today, especially in clear water when I can see trout in the current. But most people agree that the use of a separate indicator on the leader is an easier and more effective way to do it. Most of the insects and crustaceans trout eat are weak swimmers, and they don't swim against the current or swim across current lanes. They drift with the current at the same speed as bubbles and debris, and it's a trout's job to sort out the food from the junk. And it's our job to make sure our nymphs drift in the same way, because although it's difficult for us to perceive a nymph that is not drifting naturally from our perspective, trout do this all day long, all their lives, and the slightest hint of suspicious activity alerts them that what is drifting by is not food. Getting the right depth is also important. Most times, trout stay close to the bottom of a river where the current is slower and it's easier for them to hold their position. They may ignore something drifting more than a few feet above them. During aquatic insect hatches, though, when there are insects throughout the water column, trout may range from their spot on the bottom to grab something in mid-water. But when they're not actively feeding, you'll do your best shoving your flies in their face.
There are all kinds of different indicators that you can buy in a tackle shop, and they all have their purposes. Different ones for different water types. I carry a ton of them. First and foremost is the extremely popular and infamous thingamabobber. And it's soft plastic filled with air, so it floats really, really well. And to attach this, you merely fold your leader over, slide it through the hole, bring the loop around the other side of the indicator, pull it through, and it's snug. And as long as your leader is fairly thick, it won't slide up and down the leader, and it's very easy to loosen that up and then move it any place in your leader. Similar to the thingamabobber is one called an airlock, and it's a little bit harder plastic, still filled with air. But this one, you just twist off the top, and there's a little rubber grommet inside there. You put your leader through a slot, and then you screw down on there. Again, it floats all day long, really easy to move on the leader and doesn't put a kink in your leader. Then there are also hard-bodied types that are solid, either cork or foam or plastic. Here's one that has a little tab in it, and again, you fold your leader over, you pass it through there, and you peg it in place so it doesn't slide on your leader. Now these work great and they're easy to move around, but these two things tend to catch on your leader and get tangled, so not my favorite, but they are easy to use and they do float all day long. Here's one that's very similar to the thingamabobber, except this one is solid cork. So again, it floats all day long, bounces along on the current really nicely, and like the thingamabobber, you double over your leader butt, you pass it through the hole there, you pull it around the other side, and you snug it tight. Another one called a twist-on. These are small. They're made out of some sort of high-floating plastic, hard plastic, maybe styrofoam or something like that. And you just put the leader inside there, and you twist it around. There's a rubber band, and then that holds the leader in place. Then there's a type I don't really like very much. They're really easy to use. They're made out of foam, and they have sticky stuff on the back. And you pull them off, and you fold this over your leader, and then it holds it in place. Now, some people like them because they're very sensitive. They're very light and very sensitive, but you can't move them on your leader, and you find them all over the riverbank because they come off and they never disintegrate. So I don't particularly care for this kind of indicator. And then there's yarn indicators, one of my favorites. The nice thing about yarn indicator is you make them yourself. So you can make a yarn indicator as small or as large as you want. Another advantage is it's biodegradable. It's sheep's wool. So that if you lose this on the stream, no big deal. It's biodegradable just like any animal fur is. So this comes in a kit, and it comes with a little tool that has, you cut a piece of tubing and you slide it on there, you loop your leader through the tube, you slip the tube over the leader loop, and then you just hold that loop open and you take as much or as little yarn as you want, you put it inside the loop, you snug it down, and you've got a nice little wool indicator, any size you want. So for slow water like this, flatter water, I really like a yarn indicator if I'm going to use an indicator at all. The yarn is much easier to cast, it's less air resistant, it lands a lot lighter on the water, and also yarn indicators are so much more sensitive than the hard plastic ones. Sometimes in slow water it's difficult to detect a strike, but that yarn will really bounce and wiggle when you have a strike. Sometimes you have to do something because your yarn indicator may start to float low and you can't see it. So there's a couple things you can do. One is you can make a couple of quick false casts, just like you would a dry fly, to dry it off, and that should help. But if it still continues to sink and you can't see it, it's easy enough to just bring the indicator in, take the same dry fly powder that you would use for a dry fly, the desiccant powder, the white powder, dip it in there, grind it around a little bit, make sure it's thoroughly dried, and now that indicator will float high for another hour or two. Told you the yarn indicator works in flat water. That fish, I had actually thrown a hard plastic indicator over into that area earlier and made numerous drifts and never caught a fish. But that yarn indicator was just sensitive enough that I was able to see the strike. It was a very subtle strike, and the yarn helped me out. There, buddy. Took a Hendrickson nymph. Pretty wild fish. Barbless hook. Comes out quickly.
A great do-it-yourself indicator was developed by Colorado guide Pat Dorsey. You take a small rubber band used for orthodontist braces and you wrap a loop part of your leader around it 5 times. You then slip a section of polypropylene macrame yarn that you've fuzzed up with a comb into the loop. Pull the band up to snug the yarn, trim the ends if desired, and you're set to go. You can make your own indicators of any size and color that you want.